Today we will be going over how to access and manage your existing forms in the form creator. I'm going to log in as an admin of the system. Anybody that has access to the form creator would be some type of admin. This is usually determined by your global admin. So your global admin would have access to the global forms, the global settings, and then you have different other admins that can be created. But most of the time, you'll have an admin per program area in your system. And like the program area admin wouldn't have access to global forms, but they could build and manage their forms within their own program. That's typically how you see it set up. So today's video is going to be short. It's not going to be over creating brand new forms. It's all about accessing your existing forms and how you manage those. So in an example here is if we've gone live for a previous round or funding opportunity for a previous fiscal year, we'll say, and then we're getting ready and preparing for this upcoming fiscal year, this upcoming round, we need to determine if we can use the same forms or the same process that we used last year. In that case, you would first create your funding opportunity, put it in test status, and you would test using your existing forms. That's the easiest way. You've got existing forms that are already built out there, no need to recreate the wheel. So we've got it out there, and let's say, for example, that now you have different requirements or different questions or something like that that you have to ask on this new application, and you're wondering at this point, can you still use those old historical forms? And they may not be that old, but some could be like 10 years old. So it's really, how do we determine where these forms are, how old they are, how much data they're actually holding, and what can we do to them, and what determines that we should actually stop and build a new form instead for this new year. So I'm going to log in as the admin. In this particular case, I'm not a very high admin. I do have access to global forms, but I don't have access to system forms. So I'm going to go in to utilities. Any admin functionality is in the utilities menu, and your utilities menu may change depending on what type of admin you are. I do have quite a bit of access here, but it's utilities, form creator. If you have access to system forms, those are not user defined, so they're rolled out initially with the system. An example would be like the organization form. That's not only a global form, but it's a system form. It's there automatically. They would be up here in this section up at the top. So you can see I do not have access to system forms. And down here in this section, these are user-defined forms, and it depends on what type of access you have. So for example, I have one program area, and then I do have access to global forms. So the rows here are what you have access to. There are many programs on the system that I'm using, but this user, this admin that I logged in as, only has access to the training program area. So it really limits what they see. So I only see the training program forms, and I happen to have global forms as well. The columns are the type of forms. So you can see funding opportunity, application, review, and so on. Those are the type of forms. So if I wanted to look at my existing application forms for the training program area, I can see that there are 12. And that hyperlink there, I can click on that and get to all 12 of those forms. If it was a status report form, and I wanted to look at status report forms for this training program area, I can see there are 5, and I would click on that hyperlink. So you have to know what type of form you're working with in order to know where to go. So in this case, I'm going to show you an application form for the training program area. This is typically where your life cycle begins, is at the application. So I'm going to click on that 12, and it's going to show me a listing of 12 forms. And up at the top, just know where you're at. It's showing me that I'm looking in the training program area at application forms. And here's my listing of the forms down here. So before we even click on a form, the most important thing is the in use. And in this view, The in-use column is huge when you're talking about historical data and managing your existing forms. And what you do is you hover over this in-use, and like this one is different than this one. This tells you where that form has been used. And so you'll look and you can see in this particular case that I'm hovering over this activities form. It's been used in 3 different funding opportunities. So I have to ask myself, have those funding opportunities actually been posted? Do they have real data, with not just test data, but actual applications? You know, we've posted it, actual applications have been submitted in and used this form in those funding opportunities. So I'm going to say yes. I see a 2022, a 2023 funding opportunity. So that means this is historical. It's been used in the past, and I need to be careful with it. That's really important to do first before you ever click on the form. Another thing to note is that it's marked copy to grant. So it's also been linked into the grant, and now there's a grant version of this form. So I really need to be careful with it, because I not only have an application form, that's the parent form, I have a grant form, and that grant form is the child, and they're truly linked in the database. That way, when you award an application into grant tracking, that data flows through to the grant. But when you're looking at it from the form perspective, you want your forms to match, right? So we don't want our grant form to look totally different than our application form. They should be identical. So manipulating this type of form, you have to be really careful, because you also have to go make the same changes to the grant form. So those are really important things to note when you're looking. I'm going to go ahead and just click on this form. So number 5 in my form listing here, it's been used in 1 funding opportunity. And I'm going to click on this form. And this is just an example form, but we're going to pretend like this has been used and it's holding real data. So you have to understand that the form itself is what's holding the data in the database. So any deleting or manipulating of this form is what you need to avoid. Okay, if you have to come in here in order to make this form work for your next funding opportunity, or maybe you've copied this form for a brand new program, that program's never had forms before, and you've copied this from a different program and you need to change some things or something like that. If you have to delete something or manipulate it and it's been used with real data, you are deleting or manipulating the existing data. So anybody that's used this application form as an applicant, that application data would be deleted or manipulated. That's what we want to avoid. So that will answer your question. If I come in here and I want to use this form for next year, but in order to do so, I have to delete something or change something, then that tells you right there, no, you can't use this form any longer. You should archive this form, create a new form. Now, could you create that new form by copying this form? Absolutely. Sometimes it's easier, though, to just build a form from scratch. If you have to do a lot of deleting and a lot of manipulating just to make this form work for the new year, it's probably easier to just build it from scratch. If it's just a couple things, then yeah, you could copy it. You would work with that new form. A brand new form isn't linked to the form that you copied it from, and you could manipulate that. And the other key thing to notice is a new form would not have that check mark in the previous page that says in use. So you would know, okay, this form has never been used. It's never been added to a funding opportunity. Therefore, it's not holding any data. I can manipulate. I can delete. But again, we're pretending that this form has been used. We've posted a funding opportunity. We've accepted applications. The applicants have filled out this form. What can I do to this form to make it work? Well, one thing you can always do is you can add. So you can add additional questions or fields to this form, and you can even add sections. You can add instructions. Adding something new does not impact the existing data. These existing fields are holding the data. Okay, so this is what a form looks on the form creator side. If I preview it, this is what it would look like to the applicant. And just remember, you should never just use the preview to accept this form. You actually need to go out and test it first. If you haven't already, make sure you test your forms first. But this preview will show you what it looks like to the actual user. This is what the form looks like in the form creator. So we've got a few fields, all different types of sections here. So let's just click on this scope of work. It's a pretty standard text box here. And I want to show you two really important things to look at: the database field name and the data type. Okay, these two things are what actually stores. So this is what stores the database. The actual database holds the all the values of this form in the database field name. The label really doesn't matter to the system. The database field name is named this, and that's what the data is all stored under. So manipulation of the database field name. So if I would come in here and do this, that would be creating a brand new database table. And then you've just eliminated that other one. You've basically orphaned it. So you never want to change your database field names. You should never change your data type either. So if it was a text box and then next year you want to, for some reason, make it a drop down, it'll tell you you're going to lose data, and you really will. It's a different database column that it would be stored on. A drop down is a totally different set of data than text. Okay, so and it tries to warn you. Okay, but we also everybody goes, well, why does it let me do it? Why can't I change it if it's going to delete data? Because as you're developing forms, you may not have real data. It may just be test data. You may be playing around with this form and getting it prepared and ready. It may be a brand new form. And so in that case, you need to be able to manipulate or delete or move things around and change it. So that's why it's really important that not everybody be an admin of the system, right? We have the admins, the defined admins of the system, and they have been trained and they know that this form is holding data and they need to be careful. They need to be able to identify if this form's been used and if it's been used in a test scenario or if it's actually been used with real data, and then they need to be careful. But something I could do to this, so we know not to change the database field name, we know not to change data type. The hint there is anything that says data, that's what you need to be careful with. Now, let's say last year you used this form, but you had some complaints from your applicants that they weren't able to put in enough characters or something like that in this field. So this is a scope of work. Sometimes applicants will put in a huge long scope of work. And so you want to increase the character. Again, that's a manipulation. You're increasing the character. You're making the box larger. That is okay. It's always okay to make it bigger. What you can't do is make it smaller. So you should not decrease an existing field that's been used. So this one, the maximum length is 500. So it's 500 characters. So I could go, well, I want to go ahead and increase it to 1500. That is perfectly okay. We're just making it bigger. Now, if I decreased it to like 250 characters, I want you to imagine a box that held 500 characters and we're storing 500 characters. What I do when I take it down to 250 is I'm actually decreasing the size of that box. And in doing so, I'm deleting 250 characters of the actual data that this field is holding in the system. So you would be deleting data. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that alone. That's our character count. I'm going to scroll down. All these things I'm scrolling past are advanced. So we're going to have an advanced form creation training that'll go over all of this. We'll also have standard basic form creation. Again, this is just managing your existing forms that already exist. So I'm going to scroll past all this advanced stuff. One other thing that just does not matter, absolutely does not matter to the system, are your labels and instructions. So you don't have to be afraid to change a label or instructions. Now, it should mean the same thing that it meant before. You know, you wouldn't want to change your scope of work question to like something that means totally, you know, something else like activities, you know, list your activities or something like that where it wouldn't make sense in the previous years, because all the changes that you make here are immediate. They immediately change, and they change everywhere this form's ever been used. So if this form was used for 5 years and I come in and I change a header or instructions, or I actually change this label, it goes back everywhere this form has ever been used, and that's what the label will be for this field. So you should not change the meaning of it. But if you need to describe it a little bit further or add better instructions, you can go ahead and add those. You can delete instructions too that doesn't actually impact data. And then everybody will have their own preference on what type of instructions you like. You might like headers. You might get really fancy with HTML coding and like it bold or something like that. So you don't have to do all of the labels and instructions, but a lot of times you'll find out after you've used the form that maybe you need to maybe describe the need of what you're looking for in this scope of work a little better next year. Maybe you had a lot of applicants submitting in applications that were a little vague, and they weren't, specifically identifying the area you needed them to identify. So you can come in here and add these instructions. You just have to understand it's not just going to show for this year. It's going to show anywhere this form has ever been used. So again, going back to the original question, how do I know if I can use the same form? And how do I know, what makes it to where I have to go create a new form? Well, if it's just instructions and we're still asking the same questions, we just need to add some more instructions, that's fine. It's the manipulation and the deletion of the existing data. Okay, so I wanted to keep this training short and sweet. We're going to have some longer videos in different pieces for brand new forms, creating them from scratch, and then the advanced things and even budgets. But this one's just management. Again, if you ever don't know, it's always best to stop and find someone to help you. That might be going to a different admin in a different program. It might be going to your global admin. It might even be, requesting that your global admin contact DTPI. Whatever it is, it's better to ask first than it is to come in here and make the change and then lose all that data. So those are the things you want to think about. Thank you for watching.